The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and or action for victims of racism, white supremacy. If you do not understand white supremacy, racism, what it is, and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Neely Fuller, Jr., 1971. The most destructive act committed by white supremacists against non-white people: sexual intercourse, sexual play, and or sexual confusion. Explanation. Next to white supremacy racism itself, sexual activity is the second strongest motivating force among the people of the known universe. The persons who have dominant functional control or influence over the sexual expressions and or desires of others, other persons, animals, etc., also have dominant control over the basic motivations of those same persons in other areas of expression, including economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, and war. Any white person who engages in sexual intercourse with a non-white person under conditions dominated by white supremacy has done more to promote the maintenance, expansion, and or refinement of white supremacy than he or she could have done by any other means in any other area of activity. This is also true when a white person under conditions dominated by white supremacy commits a counter-sexual act, so-called homosexual act, with against a non-white person. Anything that a white person says or does that helps to promote such behavior, and or anything that a white person says or does that helps to promote sexual confusion of any kind among non-white people is by so doing practicing racism in its most destructive force. Two basic reactions to racism, white supremacy. 1. Cooperation with white supremacy. 2. Resistance to white supremacy. Explanation. Cooperation with white supremacy racism means any thought, speech, and or action by persons that directly or indirectly helps to promote white supremacy. Resistance to white supremacy racism means any thought, speech, and or action that is effective against white supremacy and is intended to be. In a world socio-material system dominated by white supremacy, each and every person who is physically and or mentally able to do so is either cooperating with white supremacy or resisting it. Each and every white person who is physically or mentally able to willfully and deliberately cooperate with white supremacists and who does so is him or herself a white supremacist racist. Each and every white person who willfully resists white supremacy is not a white supremacist, but this is only during the period when he or she is actually speaking and or acting effectively against white supremacy. No non-white person is or can be a white supremacist. As long as white supremacy exists, no non-white person is or can be a racist. As long as white supremacy exists, all non-white persons are victims of white supremacy. Those who willfully and deliberately cooperate with white supremacy are victims as well as those who resist it. No white person, however, is or can be a victim of white supremacy. This is true of those who practice white supremacy and those who do not practice it. Note: under socio-material conditions dominated by white supremacy, and white person who practices racism is a racist white supremacist. Also, any white person who is able to speak and or act against white supremacy, even under threat of death, and who does not do so, is during any period when he or she is not doing so, a white supremacist. 4 basic show-offisms by among the victims of racism. 1. Showing off to each other the things that white people have allowed them to obtain. 2. Showing off to each other the information that white people have allowed them to obtain. 3. Showing off to each other their ability to belittle each other. 4. Showing off to each other their ability to make sexual impressions on each other. Explanation: many non-white people spend much time, energy, money showing off to each other. They do this as a means of trying to make the overall effects of racism, white supremacy, on their personal affairs seem unimportant and or non-existent. This show-offism serves no constructive purpose. It only helps non-white people and to become more pitiful, primitive, and stupid, and or silly in comparison to the activities of white supremacists, and or in comparison to white people in general. Two basic methods of resisting racism, white supremacy. 1. Four-wallism. 2. Open-airism. Explanation: the four-wall method of fighting white supremacy racism is the general title given to the concept of having a special meeting place for those persons who seek to resist white supremacy. For the most part, this also includes the following: regular meetings by 2 or more persons, the renting and or buying of meeting halls and or buildings, repeated fundraising, centralized or closed-in activities, formal acquisition, storage, or supplies to be distributed and are sold for support to organizational activities, mandatory and regular payment of dues, payment of salaries and or giving of awards to organizational personnel, regular accumulation of funds for legal fees, etc. Designated leadership, persons who regularly give orders or directives. Designated fellowship, persons who regularly follow the orders and or directives of the persons who are designated as leaders. Promoting the practice of thinking, speaking, and or acting as if a particular number of people situated in a certain place at a certain time and calling themselves a particular name or title constitutes an organization. Promoting the practice of calling an area of land by a specific name or title and or referring to it as a country, nation, state, etc. Promoting the practice of calling persons by a specific name and or title, and then associating that name and or title with the same and or little associated with a particular area of land. Promoting the practice of associating a person with a thing by speaking and or acting as if the person and the thing are one and the same, and or that the person and the thing represents each other. Examples: buildings, flags, maps, pictures, statues, words, etc. The four-wall method is the standard and or traditional procedure used by the victims of white supremacy in their resistance to white supremacy. It is called the four-wall method because the non-white people who use the method plan, talk, and generally try to inspire each other by meeting each other regularly in building that usually has 4 or more walls. The walls may be of stone, wood, wire, or some other structure that is erected by people. The effectiveness of the meetings in the accomplishment of their purposes are oftentimes judged on the basis of the numbers of people that appear within a walled area. At the same time, if the same people assemble often enough, they are usually asked or expected to assemble regularly. They may be awarded a name and or title and told that they are members of an organization of people. The structure, building, etc., in which the members meet is usually considered to be the headquarters and or central meeting place. The power of the people attending a meeting at this headquarters is oftentimes measured by the total number of people who appear regularly at the particular place. Those persons who appear regularly are usually expected to contribute money, socialize, and use names and or titles that are associated with that particular assembly of people at the particular place of assembly. In a world socio-material system dominated by white supremacists, racists, the four-wall method of resisting white supremacy, racism has the following weaknesses. Oftentimes, many of the most effective people who attend counter-racist meetings do not attend to help eliminate racism, but are sent by and or are financially assisted by white supremacists to work to defeat the purpose of meetings. When money is collected, much of it is stolen and or used for purpose other than the elimination of racism. Most of the time, too much time, energy, money, etc. is spent trying to obtain or maintain the four walls and or the regular structure or place. Where the people assemble to talk about that, they should or should not be doing to accomplish their goal. Power is too often judged on the basis of the number of people who attend a particular meeting and or on the basis of how crowded with people at particular walled structures was at a particular time. Squabbling is usually increased as the number of people attending meetings increases, usually because of the development of personality clashes. Those who are lax in attending meetings and are those who are not considered to be members of organization are generally treated as unimportant, uncooperative, and or as outsiders. Promoting the appearance of being substantially effective against white supremacy racism without being substantially effective against white supremacy. The open-air method of resisting white supremacy racism is practically the functional opposite of the four-wall method. The open-air method is generally characterized by informal communications and or association, no regular meetings, no renting or buying of meeting halls and or buildings, no repeated fundraising activities, nor formal acquisition and storage of supplies to be distributed and or sold for support of organizational activities, no payment of organizational dues, no payment of salaries and or giving of awards to organizational personnel, no regular accumulation of funds for legal fees, etc., no designated leadership. Every person speaks and or acts as his or her own leader according to individual selections from a code of thought, speech, and action. No designated fellowship. Every person speaks and or acts as his or her own follower according to individual selections from a code for thought, speech, and action. No thought, speech, and action that is dictated by one person and or by a special designated group of persons in a world socio-material system dominated by white supremacists, racists. The open-air method of resisting white supremacy, racism has the following basic weakness. It is initially difficult to communicate the idea of a counter-racist code to all of the victims of racism, non-white people, in a manner that effectively motivates most of them, to think, speak, and act according to the suggestions of that code. Summation. The basic differences between the four-wall method of resisting racism and the open-air method is as follows. The four-wall method generally is characterized by two or more persons attending regular meetings at the same time and the same places according to a mutual agreement they have made with each other. The open-air method generally is characterized by one or more persons thinking, saying, or doing specific things at all times in different places according to an individual agreement with a specific code of thought, speech, and or action. Note, the United Independent Compensatory Code System concept is an open-air method of resisting racism. Two basic objectives of correct law enforcement. 1. To promote justice. 2. To eliminate injustice. Explanation. A law is a tool. A law is a tool that can be used to produce and or maintain justice. A law can also be used as a tool to produce and or maintain injustice. Any law that is enforced by people in a manner that does not promote justice and or is enforced in such manner that injustice is not eliminated. In a non-law, any person who enforces a non-law is acting as an outlaw. A person acts as an outlaw should not be allowed to enforce law. 3. Basic steps toward racial subjugation compensation. 1. Ask for what should be given. 2. Ask what is granted. 3. Compensate for the differences between what was asked for and what was granted. Explanation. 1. Ask for what should be given. This means that non-white people should ask the white supremacist racists to reveal truth, not just facts, and to produce justice and correctness in all things, at all times, in all areas of activity, including economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Those white people who practice white supremacy, racism, have established and maintained the practice through falsehood, non-justice, and incorrectness. Therefore, the revelation of truth plus the production of justice and correctness can be established by first eliminating white supremacy and replacing it with thought, speech, and action that uses truth in such a manner that justice and correctness is produced. This is what should be asked for. 2. Accept what is granted. This means that since it is the white supremacist racists who are supreme over all of the non-white people of the known universe in all areas of activity, it is therefore correct for the victims of white supremacy to accept whatever the white supremacists choose to grant them. That is the constructive value. The non-white people of the known universe have nothing that is not subject to the power of the white supremacists. Therefore, non-white people should accept from the white supremacists whatever they grant that is of constructive value, even if that which is granted is less than that which was asked for. As long as that which is granted is less than that which was asked for, the non-white people should continue to ask for that which should be granted, namely the revelation of truth and the establishment of justice and correctness in all areas of activity. 3. Compensate for the differences. This means that after the victims of white supremacy, non-white people ask repeatedly for what should be given, and after they accept what is granted, they should study what was granted to see if it is the same as that which was asked for. If what was granted is not the same as that which was asked for, non-white people should then speak and act to compensate for the difference between what was asked for and what was granted. They can do this by thinking, speaking, and acting according to a code of behavior that promotes the revelation of truth and the use of truth in such manner that justice and correctness is produced in all areas of activity, including economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. 4 basic entitlements towards the promotion of justice. 1. Adequate teaching, learning facilities for constructive communication so that every person knows the truth about everything that he or she needs to know in order to do or have done anything that should be done. 2. Adequate housing and constructive control over adequate space, land, etc. 3. Adequate and progressive health facilities and nutritional products. 4. Adequate, safe, comfortable, convenient, and efficient transportation.